Brilliant, in your working environment. Mariam, thanks so much. Looking forward to it. Now, the Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman is due to meet President Trump in Washington shortly. The two leaders are likely to discuss the threat posed by Iran. Both men are not fans of the 2015 nuclear deal signed between Tehran and world powers. The official visit by Prince Salman comes with Saudi Arabia and Iran locked in a proxy war in Yemen. Well, let's speak to Mohammed Alyahya, a senior fellow at the think tank, the Gulf Research Center. Mohammed, thanks very much for joining us here on Impact. President Trump made his first foreign visit to Saudi Arabia, and now, of course, lots of preparation before MbS, as he's known, has come to the US. So it feels like they're trying to restart this relationship that really was fractured under the Obama administration.
I think you're right. I think the US-Saudi bilateral relationship suffered under the Obama years as a result of his administration's policies towards the Middle East, more so than they did at any other point in the past in US-Saudi relations. And we've seen that almost from day one, things have gone back to normal with the Trump administration, especially with President Trump's pivot towards back towards Saudi Arabia and choosing Saudi Arabia as the first destination for his first foreign visit.
What do you think will be some of the topics they'll discuss? Iran, obviously.
Well, Iran will definitely be one of these topics. President Trump is due to decide on recertifying the Iran deal on May the 12th after negotiations with the Europeans. I imagine that Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the officials that have come with him will be discussing Iran's regional activities and discussing Saudi Arabia's analysis of the Iranian threat within its own national security framework and exploring the ways where that overlaps with the United States assessment.
Of course, this trip comes as the war in Yemen continues. Our chief international correspondent has recently been there and spoken to some of the people in the country. Let's just have a look at a little bit of a clip of her story from there.
The coalition's airstrikes have reportedly caused the greatest number of child casualties in this war. 6-year-old Lamise wants them to stop.
سلمان هو ضرب بيتنا. أشتي يتوقف الحرب يكون بيتنا آمن.
So often, it's the youngest who lose the most. These little boys are being fitted with prosthetics at this Saudi-funded clinic. 11-year-old Abdullah mistook a landmine for a toy.
فتحتها كذا ما يفتح فتحتها كذا بشدة تصدمت يدي يعني شظايا أنا وفي رأسي يعني وفي رجلي.
The situation there in Yemen. Of course, there's a lot of focus of the reforms domestically that MbS is putting in place, but he's also the architect of this ongoing conflict, which has left 10,000 dead, a country in famine and facing cholera as well.
Definitely, the humanitarian crisis in Yemen right now has reached unprecedented proportions, and the need to end it as soon as possible hasn't been higher. But one must consider, that the Saudis, I think, in their calculus, are in a gridlock. What they won't accept is that is the opportunity for the IRGC to set up shop at Bab al-Mandeb and start to threaten international trade. That's a problem for the international community, not just the Saudis. And the other thing that they won't tolerate is Iranian ballistic missiles being fired into Saudi Arabia.
And I know
anything short of that in terms of negotiations is not something that they will settle for.
That's the argument that the Saudis use, but we've seen so many devastating photographs and images of the humanitarian crisis in Yemen. I mean, it hasn't gone down well for Saudi Arabia.
In what sense do you mean?
Well, given this humanitarian crisis, this famine, 10,000 dead in Yemen, for Saudi Arabia's standing in the international community.
Definitely, and that's a big problem for Saudi Arabia, it's a big problem for Yemen, and it's going to pose an even bigger problem when it comes to rebuilding Yemen and working on the post-conflict development mechanisms that are going to be needed to bring Yemen back to normal. But again, I don't see the Saudis budging on the ballistic missiles issue and on the commitment to ensuring that the IRGC does not set up a foothold in Bab al-Mandeb. Anything short of that, they're willing to negotiate with the Houthis, and for several reasons. I mean, these negotiations in Kuwait or in Oman or elsewhere have been aborted.
Just tell us about the relationship between President Trump and Mohammed bin Salman. I mean, as I said, President Trump's first trip was to Saudi Arabia. Do the two men get on?
It seems that they definitely do, and one must consider is that this is the U.S.-Saudi bilateral relationship returning to what it was since the days of President Roosevelt. So this is going back to normal. This isn't something that's new in characterizing the U.S.-Saudi relationship. It's the strain that occurred under President Obama's tenure that, in contrast, makes what we're seeing today look a little bit different.
What we're seeing that's also quite different, though, is a very young prince in his early 30s trying to make dramatic changes in Saudi Arabia and regionally. The blockade in Qatar, for example, and even domestically, the purge. I'm just being told we've got 30 seconds left on the program, so we'll have to leave it there. Mohammed, thanks very much for joining us here on Impact. Well, we will be back in 30 minutes' time. Mariam's coming up for Business Live, so for Talking Business, rather.